All right. Welcome to the downside.
Hi,
My name is Gianmarco Soresi. I'm here with my co-host,
Russell.
Russell
Daniels.
Oh my God.
Wow.
And we are scoot in a little bit, buddy. We're here with legendary stand-up comedian, actor, performer, podcaster, everything, Ted Alexandro. And let's hit this music. 1, 2, 3. Downside.
You're listening to The Downside.
The Downside.
With Gianmarco Soresi.
All right. Ted, thank you. You're here from Connecticut, yes?
That's true. I'm still getting used to saying that, but yeah, and I think that fits right in with the whole negative vibe of the podcast. I've left New York for Connecticut.
We can shit all over Connecticut. We'll get back to you in a second. I'm feeling very stressed right now. I'm doing a lot of traveling. This is my first time stand-up comedian, like touring a little bit, but also I'm doing a lot of like my friends getting married in Hawaii. I have an old middle school friend. Everyone is at a different economic level than me at this whole wedding. He went to Stanford, soccer scholarship, Stanford business. He works for DoorDash right now.
Yeah.
And,
not as like a
not delivering the food
as a programmer or something.
As a programmer, like the guy who's making sure they don't unionize, that kind of job.
Good.
Right. A lot of money to be made there, and it's just one of these trips where I'm like, I want him to know, like, just so you know, me coming to this, that's my one thing for the year, and I'm doing it for you, and I'm trying to get gigs. While I'm there, I'm trying to extend the trip, get gigs in Hawaii, but then you book a gig and you're like, oh, there's different islands in Hawaii. And so is this gig in Honolulu? And I'm asking me and my girlfriend, Tova Silberman, to add an extra flight. It's just very, very tough. And I'm not famous enough to call up a venue and say, hey, lucky you, Gianmarco Soresi's flying to Honolulu today. Let's set up a one-nighter. And so then it's like, then am I booking a bar show for 10 minutes?
Yeah.
And we're adding a $500 new flights to make that happen. And should I just relax and not do stand-up for 4 days? No, that's not the answer.
It's a lot. Yeah. Am I allowed to interject? I don't know.
Oh, please.
Okay.
You know my struggle more than traveling, weddings. Where's the furthest you've ever gone for a wedding?
I know it all too well. The furthest I've gone for a wedding, I don't think I've gone out of the States, probably just the West Coast. And even that was asking a bit too much. I think what you're saying as far as this being the favor for the year, I would extrapolate that to 5 years or even a decade, because in these times, the audacity of anyone to invite you to leave like a 5-mile radius of your home is audacious and bordering on obnoxious. So, I think it's good to try to find work to offset that, not just offset it emotionally. So you're back in a comfortable space for you.
Well, it's also, he's also asked, he's not sure yet. He's like, we think we may want you to perform.
Oh God.
And then it's like, we think we may want you to perform at the dinner. We're still figuring it out. And of course, I would never tell my friend, I'd love to be paid. My wedding fee is quite high because it's one of those gigs you don't want to do.
You don't want to do it.
But there's so much money. I would love if a room was offered. I've already thought of a couple lines. I was going to open with something about DoorDash, so I'll be working for tips, something like that. I really want to stick it to DoorDash.
Yeah. That's good.
But also, he said, just so you know, her family is Catholic. He's Asian, his wife's Asian, the whole family will be Asian. So, there's a lot of I'll have jokes where I'll be like, or I don't want to ruin the wedding. The wedding is not the time for me to prove that I'm the next George Carlin.
No, I hate to be the one to bring this up, but you might not be right for the gig.
Yeah.
You might not be right for the gig.
Yeah.
So for a wedding, it's such a specific environment already. And then added on top of that, them, and then if it's an all Asian wedding, I mean, God forbid you're just trying to make something funny. If you fuck up at a club and offend somebody, that's one thing. But if you fuck up at a wedding and you're hanging out, in Hawaii for the rest of the week after you said something, and I've done families' weddings. it's always a chore, you know, it's never just a gig. It's like trying not to step on a landmine, you know? So
well,
that's
it's also,
tough.
yeah, it's also like, okay, so you and your girlfriend, you know, you're gonna pay probably $1,000 or so in plane tickets, then a hotel, and then on top of that, put together half an hour of content. You know, like it's another thing where it's like that's a big. I mean, it almost balances out if it's like we'll pay for something. One of the components. You know, maybe that's worth it, but I don't know.
But there's also a thing where it's like, you know, people like, oh, a comedian, you'll do a speech, but I'm like, writing new material is like much harder than people realize. And if I'm going to speak at a wedding, I better be the funniest at the wedding.
Well, yeah, no, a speech though has a different level of expectation than will you do a set for us, you know?
Yeah.
And I always feel like it's good as a comedian to unplug from things. If you've already said yes to the wedding, you and your girlfriend are going. Did you say girlfriend, wife? I don't mean to.
No, no, girlfriend.
Okay, forgive me. Edit that out if it's
Jesus Christ.
So you and your girlfriend are going. This might be a good opportunity to detach, unplug from Gianmarco comedian, and just be a human being going to Hawaii. I mean,
wouldn't that be a treat? Just
you know how tough that is. You know, as a young
try to be a human being for 4 days.
That is a long time. Yeah.
Whole year off for COVID, and so I feel like no more breaks for another 10 years.
That's fair.
Next pandemic, we'll go to Hawaii in the height of it when the flights are cheap.
Well, maybe a speech then. You know, as your consultant, I think a speech would be adequate, unless they're throwing big money at you, or they cover the room, or some sort of thing that makes it worth your while. Because for me, I would have just all this anxiety. It colors the whole trip. If you know I have to do a half hour in front of the whole both families, then you can't enjoy. It's like you sabotage a trip to Hawaii, where you're going to be thinking about that, and you sabotage your time with your girlfriend, because it's like, for me anyway, I would be just consumed with now. This is not a trip to my friend's wedding to Hawaii, to paradise. This is a gig that I have to figure out, a tough gig,
a non-paying gig in fucking Hawaii. When you've done weddings, and like, do you have those gigs where you're like, oh, do I want to say my Catholic church joke at this one? There's a lot of Catholics there. Am I going to do it?
Don't do it.
Oh, I want to do it. I have a lot of Catholic church jokes. We all do.
Yeah, no, I've been in that position, and you know how it is, where you kind of dip a toe and you say like, well, this one's kind of tepid. I'll see how it goes, and then if it looks like the room's digging it, then I'll bring out the big guns. But yeah, I mean, you know, it's the kind of thing that you never know until you test that first one.
Now your wedding was not too long ago, right?
Yeah, it'll be 3 years in October.
Congratulations. Did comedians speak? Did you have any comedians like do a really killer set?
I did not, although I bet some of them were itching to, but and I had some big names, not to drop. I mean, I had the Todd Barrys, the Judy Golds of the world. Yeah, so it was, I mean, I had plenty of great comedians. I don't mean to leave anyone else out, but I had my two brothers were my co-best men, and they're both very funny. So they both, I mean, comedians were coming up to me and commenting on how funny both of my brothers were. And that's fun.
That's fun.
And then my wife's sister spoke. So there was plenty of humor, but it was not provided by professionals.
Good. Did your vows, did you have a little joke? Did you get any laughs in your vows, or were you like, no, this is none of that?
I'm kind of a sappy guy. So like for the vows, I mean, I had one or two like little nuggets just, you know, to remind people that I'm a comedian, but for the most part, like I was pretty sappy and pretty like, you know, telling our story.
Yeah.
And she was funnier than I was, you know, my wife is funny. So, but I don't know. I always feel like I have plenty of opportunities to be funny. So, my vows is an opportunity to show other colors. Maybe there's some casting people out there, and I'll say, wow.
Oh, you can do drama too. All right. Law and Order, maybe. Okay.
Exactly.
So you relocated to Connecticut pretty recently.
Yeah. Pandemic move, November of last year.
So, you know, as I told you before this is a negative podcast, and any downsides to being in Connecticut?
Well, all the ones that you would think, just that, like leaving New York. I'm a born and raised Queens kid. I had been in Astoria for the past 20 years. So I had this aversion. My brother and his family live in Connecticut, but that's what I thought of it as. It's like a family place, and if you're in the arts, it's where you go to die. It's like it's over. You're just like, you're a family man now. So I had a real aversion, and we were mostly looking like upstate New York, because that's where all the artists go, and, Beacon, and where everyone, where you can't afford anything. So then finally we switched. We've been looking since before the pandemic, by the way, but the pandemic kind of just gave us a little bit more motivation. So then we started looking, we're like, why don't we take a look? I mean, it's still, less than 2 hours from the city. So we looked, and we found a really nice place, and kind of like, it's like the woods, really. Like, we're kind of out there. But yeah, I do feel in a mental sense, like almost like I'm out of show business. Like, even though I'm getting back to stand up, and I'm doing my own podcast and everything, there is this thing of like, now I'm like pretending to be in show business.
Yeah.
I'm a Connecticut guy.
So
Like,
do you come in for shows like or at all? Yeah.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Yeah. Honestly, like, my first gig that's on the books is August 6th and 7th. I'm going to Vegas. I work with Jim Gaffigan. I've been opening for him for, 6 years now. So that's the first gig that I have on the books, like proper gig. But my plan is and this kind of excites me. You guys can probably relate. Just to find some divey open mic in Connecticut. Like, doesn't even have to be comedy. Could be like poetry and a folk song. And I'm just going to sign my name to the list, and I'm going to do 10, 15 minutes to get ready for Vegas. I'm going to try to find a few of those, just like the shittiest things I can find, to feel like I'm starting again. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's fun.
That's so stressful to me. That sounds, you go from, I'm like, oh, I'm scared about my stand-up New York gig. I mean, you're going to a huge gig. Have you performed since COVID yet on stage?
No, not other than Zoom. No, I have not. But I've done all those things, man. Like, I was talking to my comedian friend recently about how all of those like prestige things, whether it's, getting past at the Cellar, or, whatever room. I mean, I was in the Cellar, I was out of the Cellar, I was blacklisted, I was back.
When were you blacklisted?
Well, I organized the comedians for a pay raise in the early 2000s. And when I did that, I was blacklisted by, they didn't come out and say it, but suddenly my spots dried up at the Cellar, at Caroline's, because I had a fight with Louis Ferranda. Because there was supposed to be like a meeting, almost like a Godfather-like meeting of the five families, where all of the club owners and managers were supposed to meet at the Friars Club. And they all RSVP'd. Everybody said, we'll be there. So there was like maybe a group of, it was probably close to 30, 40 comedians that showed up. And we had a lawyer from AFTRA who was kind of acting on our behalf. And then everyone showed up except for Caroline's. They didn't have anybody at the meeting after saying they would. So I called up Louis Ferranda, and I gave him a piece of my mind. First, I spoke to his assistant, and I said, this is really disrespectful. A lot of work went into organizing this. Everyone else showed up. There's dozens of comedians who are negotiating for a standard of living that, that they can get by in New York. And not only you said you would show up, you did not show up, and there was no explanation. So then he took real offense to that. Actually, I left it as a voicemail first, because his assistant wouldn't put me through.
Yeah.
I'm like, all right, well, give me his voicemail. So I unloaded on him, and then he called back, and he's like, Louis is really upset about the voice. I'm like, good, put him on the phone. I want to talk to him. That's why I called.
Yeah.
So needless to say, that's the last time I worked Caroline's, except for the time that during the what is it called? The New York Comedy Festival. I guess Caroline's is kind of behind that. Louis, back in the day, I was opening for Louis in like 2008 or 9. Louis insisted that I open for him, and Louis was, I guess, pushed back, because Louis called me and said, do you have some kind of thing with Louis Ferranda? I was like, yeah, sort of. Why? He's like, because he said you couldn't open, and I was like, fuck you, Ted's opening for me. So yeah, so that was, I have this kind of long history with Caroline's where I still haven't performed there.
Oh wow!
And did you get that pay raise?
Yeah, on two occasions. The first time I did it by myself, I wrote a petition in like, I guess it was 2001 or so. Got that signed by about 100 comedians. Got a $10 pay raise. The second time, Russ Maneve called me like maybe 2007, 2008, and said, "Do you want to revisit this?" And honestly, I said no. I said I had too much shit the first time, and it was so much work. It was really like a full-time job because this was really also pre like social media. So I physically was meeting people. Like, I'm going to be at a Starbucks between 8 and 10. I'm going to be at Ben's Pizza on the corner of this, because I couldn't be at the club, like, hey, guys, want to sign the petition? So I would park myself like nearby to a club for a couple hours and just wait. And, typically a bunch of comedians would come by together and they'd be like, yeah, like I think Tracy Morgan just happened to be walking by with like Sarah Silverman and 5 other people. They all signed it. So I wound up getting 100 signatures and the pay raised that first time. So Russ asked me a second time and I was kind of reluctant to do it. But then he was so passionate, and I got the sense like, okay, he's for real. He's not fucking around either. So then we did it, and we formed the New York Comedians Coalition that year. Tom Shalhoub also helped, and Buddy Bolton. There were about 4 or 5 of us doing the majority of the organizing. And that was when AFTRA got involved too. So that kind of gave us a stamp of legitimacy. And we got the pay raise on a second occasion there. So yeah, I mean, to me that, we were having these meetings at AFTRA and at the Writers Guild, 200-300 comedians coming down. It was, part of me wishes that we had those recorded because it was so funny and chaotic.
I read I'm Dying Up Here, which was about the strikes in LA with the store. And the guy who organized that, I'm pretty sure he was the one who killed himself shortly after, right? And because Mitzi had blacklisted him from the store.
Yes. But it's funny you bring that up, because Tom Dreesen, who was also involved in that, came and spoke to us. He came to, because somebody hooked me up with his info. So I felt like, this will be a good guy to speak to about negotiating with clubs and his experiences. So he came to AFTRA one afternoon and addressed the, however many, it was probably a couple hundred of us. And so that was kind of beneficial to hear what they had been through. So hopefully, thankfully, we didn't have any suicides.
Well, it's so one story I always remember from that book, and why I think it would be so hard to do anything anymore. 2 reasons. One, they said they got like every LA comedian in a conference room at like a Holiday Inn or something, and I was like, you'd have to rank out Yankee Stadium now to get every comedian in a space together.
Right.
And then there was this thing with Jay Leno, who was like, he was the killer on the scene, that someone in the meeting would be like, order, and Jay Leno would go, a quarter pounder with fries, and everyone would laugh, and no one there. There's a relentless not taking it seriously that every comedian has, and you get a room full of us. It's a fucking nightmare of who's gonna get the spotlight.
Yeah. Well, there was an element of that, an element of like who could kind of undermine what was trying to be organized. But it was good because the 4 of us who were kind of the face of it were all at that kind of perfect phase where we weren't beginners. We were probably like 10 years in, 12 years in. We weren't beginners, but we weren't like wealthy, people who we stood to benefit from the raise, and we were working all the clubs. So like the newbies were not going to speak up because they're afraid. And the older comedians weren't going to speak up because they don't give a shit. They don't really need it.
Well, that's my thing. I think like sometimes I'm like, the only ones who can really do this change is like Seinfeld feels like he could go to a club and say, I'm not performing here ever again, or I'm never doing a drop-in again until you do this. Or I've always thought Seinfeld, sometimes the people will get bumped when he comes in, and I'm like, slip every comedian $100. You made it. You made it in the time you've been here. You'll be known as the nicest guy in the world, and it'll be nothing to you.
I 100% agree. Yeah, a lot of those people who pop in, and maybe it is indicative of their attitude or their ego. because they kind of feel, and to an extent, I think they're right, that they are doing people a favor. The crowd, first and foremost, the club benefits for sure. New comedians benefit. And, you know, I can attest to this as a young comedian. If Chris Rock or Chappelle dropped in, or even Seinfeld, it was like a class in that you were learning. But having said that, like, who gives a shit? Like, just drop here, give the whoever's working the door, here's $1,000 for all the wait staff and all the comedians who were on the bill. You know what I mean? And that's nothing to Seinfeld's like almost a billionaire. So yeah. I agree. And I think they lack that perspective. I remember Chappelle used to do sets where he would go like 5, 6, 7 hours and the staff had to stay there until 5 a.m. And I was thinking to myself, like, are you not aware that these people probably have kids? They probably have to wake up with them to go to school, like all that kind of shit. Like, yeah, it baffles me.
Do you feel a certain degree of futility in terms of like it's the idea of like comedians unionizing or like getting a pay raise? I'm also looking at these clubs, a lot of whom it seems like they have business models on the verge of collapse.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, like bringers in general feel like a kind of a last ditch effort to keep things afloat. And I'm like, well, you're not going to get the money raised here when they are also essentially scamming people into paying insane amounts of money to come see their friend do 5 minutes. So I just don't, I feel very cynical about it all.
For sure. I mean, it is a very, it's almost like one step removed from strip clubs and stuff like that. It is a very scammy, very kind of underworld. And you got to see some of the seediness depending on the club. I remember Al Martin was like, he was saying, you know, I can't afford a raise. I just opened a third club. And how am I supposed to? I'm like, wait a second, you just opened a third comedy club and you're having trouble. Like, what, you're going to just keep opening more? Is that the business model? Keep opening more clubs because you're having such difficulty? Yeah. So they always claim poverty and whatever. But it's like, look, you're a comedy club. We're all independent contractors. It's like Crimea River. Like, if your business model depends on us not getting paid, then you've got a fucked up business model.
Yeah, it's a bad business model. Yeah.
Well, as a young comic, I just want to put in a note here. Lou Fran, I love. Al Martin, I love all the owners of all the comedy clubs. Which comedy club do you think does it right? Which one do you like? Do you think they did it well?
Honestly, I think the Cellar, it's funny, despite, you know, and this is why I always tell young comedians, don't burn any bridges. Don't say like, fuck them, I'm done with them. Because the Cellar, I thought I was done with them twice. And then, you know, Noam and Esty wound up coming to our wedding because we became, I just went back to the Cellar one night with a bunch of comedians after a show that I did down in like Chinatown. And they were like, we're going by the Cellar for a drink. Do you want to come? And I was like, the Cellar? Shit, man, I haven't been there in probably like 5 years. All right, yeah, I'll go for a drink. So I go in and I don't know if you know Julia McCullough, but Julian McCullough was there, and he the way he described it, he said it was like a Western, like you walked in and it was almost like the doors open. Because I hadn't been there, and he said everything stopped, which, you know, it was not true, but it was so funny to me because Esty said like, Ted, where have you been? Come, you know, like sit down. You know, she treated me like the prodigal son, and I was like, man, maybe like do I not remember this correctly?
Oh yeah.
So then I was back in the fold, and to be fair, I was also a better comedian. 5 years had gone by, I had done more things. So yeah. So to your question though. The Cellar repeatedly has gotten things right where they've given raises, not only when we asked, but even unsolicited. I mean, even though we're constantly asking, but unsolicited in the sense of we hadn't organized, they gave us a couple of more raises. So the Cellar pays like the most in the city by far at this point, even though, to be fair, I mean, I say this to Noam, it's still not enough, you know, to compared to what they're bringing in. We're the comedians. And I said to him one time, it's like, no, what would you consider the comedians who work your club? Would you consider them what, the top 5, 10% in the business? He said, probably top 1%. I'm like, top 1%. Okay, what other field are we still working for like a stipend that doesn't even pay our fucking cab? You know, if we buy a slice of pizza and take a cab, we're done. Like what other field, like the top 1% is still, so yeah, it's crazy. But I like that I have that kind of relationship, and that I allow myself the freedom to speak to owners like that. And we are friends now, and we do have that mutual respect. So yeah, even though I do think comedians should be paid a lot more than they're being paid.
I think it'll just be so interesting. We worked at UCB now and then, and now that UCB is kind of in the rubble, I feel very free to talk freely about kind of the insanity. But also, it's like, it's so interesting because they operated in a similar model to the store, where there was so much heat at the beginning of UCB that they really could get away with saying this is a showcase, because so many people, you'd go to these. I went to LA once, and it was like people were signing the performers at the end of the shows, like the industry was there. And then they build, they grow, they make their school. Suddenly there's so many people coming in. They feel resentful that they didn't get the things that they thought they were going to get out of it. UCB is like, well, we didn't promise this to you. And it was kind of, there was an implied contract between everyone. The heat is gone. So now you're just working for free. And there's a lot of new theaters trying. They're, post-COVID, we're going to see what happens, where they're paying their performers. But I will always remember when I started West Side Comedy Club, when they first opened, like I would host a Sunday night, and it was 125 and dinner. And I was like, whoa, I'm a fucking king. And then sure enough, a month later, I showed up. This bothered me. Hey, it's only 50 now.
Oh,
is that okay? And I'm like, well, I'm fucking here. And I'm 3 years in. What do you think I'm going to say? And then it was just, then it was 50 and no dinner. And that's no food is always the one that rubs me the wrong way. Give me fucking food. This is nothing to you. This is $5 to you.
Yeah. And like you said, you can fill Yankee Stadium with the number of comedians. So there's always someone who's going to take that gig if it's $25 and no food, So yeah, we're kind of almost operating against one another in a certain respect. But I always took issue with that suggestion that the club is doing you any kind of favors. Like if it's a comedy club or an improv club and they're putting you on their stage, it's because you belong there. It's because you're doing the work. You're a professional or someone who's earned the right to be on that stage. So the insinuation that you're like doing me some favor that I can be discovered or whatever. I remember Tony from Dangerfields. Tony, I forget his last name, but they were partners. He and Rodney were partners forever. And he's like, this is like college for you guys. Think of it like, you're going to like comedy college. I'm like, no, I went to college. I already went to college. This is my job. This is my job. I've been on Letterman. I've been on Conan. I've done everything. I'm like, it benefits you that the likes of me and these people with TV credits are playing your club, so you're not doing me any favors. This is not college. This is my job, So yeah, a lot of that shit is such a perverse notion, but comedians buy into it too. A lot of times I remember at the meetings, a lot of comedians saying like, well, we're lucky to work at the Cellar, or they use that it's like family. I'm like, no, I have a family. This is not my family. We can be friends. It's great. But a respectful business relationship to me is what's important, more so than calling somebody my family.
I had I won't get too details, but I had a comedian friend, older, who passed away from COVID, and he worked at this club for a very long time, and not seeing the owner of this club that he worked religiously for over a decade, not seeing the owner at the funeral was just one of those lessons. Not surprising, but just being like, don't ever inconvenience myself as a favor. It was just, it's the metaphor come to life. They don't care if you die. and I try to remember it, those times it's like, hey, can you move it from this to this? And I'm like, oh, I guess if I'll leave my date early and run. And it's like, no, I owe nothing.
Yeah. And that's something you have to learn. And I to be fair, I think that also comes with time. Like I said, like there's things that you do in year 1 and year 2 that you would never do in year 10 and on and on. But I think comedy or life in the arts, and probably any field, is a constant process of realizing what you'll say no to and when it's time to say no to things. So that's kind of the beauty of, it's almost like it's time to assess where you're at every week or month, or certainly as the years go by. It's like, no, I'm not doing that gig anymore. I fucking hate going to that place. And I there's nothing I like about it. Whereas, maybe 5 years ago, there were some things you liked about it.
Yeah, I'm working on it. Saying no. Saying no.
Oh man, yeah. You gotta.
So okay, so you said you were born in Queens.
Yeah, Belrose, Queens.
And is that good? You're not raising your kids there. You have 2 kids now, very young. But did you not? What were the downsides of growing up in Queens, or that you're like, oh, no kid should be raised?
No, I actually liked where I grew up in Belrose. It was kind of the border of Queens, and then I lived in Belrose, and then across the Jamaica Avenue. See, and here's this illustrates it. On our side, on the Queens side, it was called Jamaica Avenue. On the other side, which was Nassau, Long Island, it was called Jericho Turnpike. And that side was Belrose Manor. They were Belrose Manor. We were Belrose, Queens. So I grew up with a very stark awareness that, oh, okay, they think they're better. They think they're better than us across the street, and they were. I mean, financially, but yeah. So as far as where I grew up, though, I liked it. It was blue collar, working class, a lot of teachers, firemen, cops, the whole 9 yards. But it wasn't like I had an aversion, like I'm never bringing my kids up in Queens. It was more that, my wife grew up in a part of New Jersey where they had a yard, they had some space. And I just never considered like I said, we're kind of in the woods and we have a little bit of like a lawn and, fresh air. Like I just never really, how sometimes you deny yourself the ability to dream.
Yeah.
And she was adamant. She's like, no, I think, if we can find it, and we looked for a long time, we should get a yard for the kids. And so, yeah, we found something that with a nice little sprawl of space for the kids. So that it was more based on that than any aversion I had to bringing the kids to Queens.
As a kid, my father, we lived in Maryland and we had like 7 acres of yard, and I hated every single acre. I'm just like, I was not that kid.
Yeah.
I was not that kid. I saw the city and I was like, oh, I dream of no trees.
Yeah.
And it was just so wasted on me that the concept of a yard is not necessarily something me personally I get.
Yeah.
Do you want a yard?
No.
You have a rooftop.
I grew up. Yeah. But I grew up upstate and had the yard and things, and similar. I didn't feel a strong connection to it. I'd go to a lot of friends' houses that would have acres and farms, and I never, it wasn't something.
Maybe it's every generation. It's yard and then city, yard. And each one's like, oh, I wish we had this.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we were coming from a 2-bedroom apartment in Astoria.
Oh yeah.
Where we had our son December of 2019. So he was like 3 or 4 months when lockdown happened.
Wow.
And now we just had our daughter a month ago. So now we have 2 little ones. So yeah, it would have been, just insane to have both of them. I mean, people do it. So I'm not saying you can't, but as I think the pandemic on top of it just made it like we can't go anywhere, so now having everything just out the door and having like a few more rooms that our son can run around, it just means even for our own sanity. I don't know if he'll appreciate it or not, but we appreciate it.
Yeah.
So the pandemic happened. You're like, we need another person in this world. You're like, this is great time. Or the world's going to end soon. We got to get these people in fast.
Yeah.
It was a defiant act. Like, all right, Iris, I'm going to give you another. Let's see how many of my family you can infect.
How old is the youngest?
0. The youngest is a month old.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Was that, and did you had siblings? You were one of 5, right?
That's right.
So yeah, I guess, did you want your son to have a sibling?
Yeah. My wife and I are both one of 5. She's the youngest of 5.
Wow.
I'm the second oldest of 5. Both of us are from 3 boys, 2 girls. So yeah, we liked being from big families. We like kind of the tumultuous, just, nature of all those people living together. We never thought 5 though, but we thought like, yeah, it would be nice for our son to have a sibling.
Only children are weird. There's some deep entitlement deep
I
down.
think there's a weird thing too. It's like there's weirdness with the parents and them. Like the parents like them too much. Do you know what I mean? Like they're very precious about it. Like they're
Sure.
all of it. There's a weird thing about it.
There's that balance between 12 and you're like, okay, if 3 of them die.
Yeah.
And then 1,
yeah.
and it's just too much importance.
I think when you're married, you look for a distraction from just dealing with the 2 of you all the time. So if there's just 1 kid, that's too much responsibility.
Yes, for that kid.
Like, yeah, like, you know, you just constantly need like, all right, we're not going to deal with finances. We're not going to deal with all the shit that is kind of coming down. So let's focus on being a good dad or mom, you know? So I think that's too much pressure when there's 2 of them, then it can dissipate that a little bit, and they have each other. So
there's also ganging up. You're always ganging up. You'd always be like pairing off of like, well, you know, these 2 are getting along extra well, and then you're leaving someone out. You know, it's
right.
easier to gang up on someone.
We have a friend, our friend Chris Cafaro, and he's a middle child.
Yeah.
And he always claimed that like his father treated his younger brother like so sweetly and wonderfully, and his dad didn't believe him. And I guess they watched he found an old family movie, and like there was a moment, I guess, where his dad like clearly like didn't give a fuck about like just a family that captured exactly what he was saying. And his father was surprised. I think he was shocked that he had like made this.
I think he cried.
Error. He cried.
Yeah, it was
wow.
I it's one of those things where I'm such a big therapy proponent, and I'm like, it couldn't hurt to have someone who specializes in family dynamics just come around the house every couple of years, just hang out for a day and be like, just so you know, you're giving her an eating disorder, you're giving him an inferiority complex, just so you know, so you don't find out when they're 30 and then they hate you forever.
Would it be delivered in that manner? Just so you know.
Just so you know, you're fucking up big time. So okay, now your wife, what is she? She's an artist?
She's an artist and a psychic medium.
Okay, now
wow.
Now Ted, I just have to ask. I mean, you know, I'm a cynical, skeptical comedian, but I certainly don't want to dismiss your
Say what's
wife.
on your mind. Say what's on your mind, friend.
I don't buy any of that shit. I don't buy any of that shit. You're a skeptical guy, I imagine.
Yes and no, man. I mean, come on. Look, I think we straddle that line of absolutely skeptical, cynical, but as artists, also like, yes, of course, yes, the world, the universe, what you know, what's out there, what I can't possibly grasp everything that's going on. So there's both of those things are at play, and my wife is the same way, and she constantly like even questions herself. She's like, you know, it's just this gift that she's had and felt for a long time, and then studied with notable people and learned. You know, she spent probably 2 or 3 years really immersing herself in study and practice and that kind of stuff, and then kind of opened her own practice. But yeah, always, you know, it's very much akin to stand-up, where you have those self-doubts and like, what the fuck am I even doing? Am I a comedian? You know, she constantly has those doubts, but then, you know, she has a reading where it really helps someone, and it helps someone who's grieving, someone who's lost. And and I've seen my wife where she really has these I don't know if it's, I don't even know the terminology around it, like a visitation or somebody, you know. I
mean, I get it. And let me give you stand-up comedy. I make up stuff all the time, so I totally see how the two.
right. And you die all the time.
Yes.
Let me give you one example. I have a close friend whose sister died tragically when we were in college. It was like one of the most kind of like viscerally, you know, just seared things in my memory, because I was around when it happened. And my wife said to me one time, and I'd never mentioned her or talked about my friend's sister, and she said his sister's name. She said, did he have a sister whose name was Sarah? And I said, yeah. And she said, you know, she wants him to know that she's okay, or, you know. And it was kind of just like, it just came through one day. She didn't know my friend's sister, didn't know any of the details. So yeah, that kind of thing.
Is that primarily the work that she does is like meeting with families and doing that sort of thing, or like, because I feel like there's sometimes different, psychic mediums have different abilities and different things. Is that primarily the kind of work she does in that way?
She's mostly doing theaters now. No, she's doing the theater circuit. No, she does family. She does one-on-one consultations, people, through her website, people that reach out and say, I would like to book a reading. So that's kind of
Does that ever come up like so it must be so fascinating. You're married to her. Like there must be things popping up.
I told you all the time.
Like,
say,
all
hey,
the
I'd love
time,
to
like,
check in with so and so.
Does that happen? Like,
how's grandma?
Yeah, are you checking? Is that something that comes up, or like once in a while? Because I feel like, that could be like, if it was every day, it might be like, I don't need to hear from that person today. But I imagine it's reserved for special things. But I don't,
No, that's almost, in a way, that's almost like a personal space thing. It was unusual that she offered that to me.
Okay.
About my friend. It's not like she's constantly like, I've got Aunt Pam here. It's not like it constantly comes up. And I've not booked a reading with her or done anything like that. Almost like I don't know.
She's never booked like a private show from you.
yeah. I think it's that kind of thing where it's like I don't. And also just the familiarity. She'd wind up yelling at me like, no, I'm talking about your aunt. Or, like we just get into a fight about it because it's too close. But no, I have
version. You'd be doing jokes about your wife. You're like, my wife, she's always this, and yeah. I will. Let me just say, like, there's the rational, irrational, all these things, but there's also, here's where I go when I hear about readings. I think, okay, this person who died is visiting. I'm like, do you know how many fucking people died right now? What about all the people? For some reason, North Korea is always like my go-to point where I'm like, all the fucking people who died in North Korea today who don't get to visit or say hi? Or what about all the people who died? I think about, it's a Louis C.K. bit, but he always talked about all the people who had died. He opened something with like, most people are dead. And I'm like, there's dead people spanning centuries and centuries, and none of them ever say hi. No one ever says, oh, I'm being visited by, this is before they even had names. His name's is, and he says,
why would they be visiting a person if they had no connection to them?
Because maybe they're mad. Maybe they're just mad. Or maybe someone in fucking North Korea is mad that no one fucking.
I'm sure North Korea psychics are getting contacted from North Koreans that are dead. I don't
I don't even know if there's North Korean psychics. I don't know if that's allowed.
I don't know.
And when I go to fucking Reagan, Ronald Reagan was, made policy decisions based on his wife's astrologist. And I'm like, this is not good. This is no.
Well, maybe Reagan comes through now maybe he comes through to Biden and he's still making policy.
Sure.
Yeah.
No, I don't look. All of those things are valid, and my wife would say the same thing to you. She'd say, maybe this isn't for you.
Yeah. And also, there's just no easy answer. Like people.
You have to be like anything else, right? Like religion or anything that you do. Going to see a magic show. There is a surrender to anything that you're opening up to, unless you're just going and sitting in the pew of some church or mosque or temple because it's what your family does and, you check out for an hour. But if you're going there with some sort of openness, there is a surrender of like, this could all be bullshit, but, I get something out of congregating. I get something out of this interaction and saying, I don't know either, but here I am.
I want to be an open.
No, you don't.
I do. I desperately do. And I remember when I used to feel like pain. Like I remember listening to George Carlin early on, and like George Carlin, especially in his later years, would do stuff like, there's no God. And that was the whole track. And it was like, it was brutal when you're like a young hoping, you're like, please let there be a purpose to have this person you admire be like,
Yeah.
And
there still could be no God and spirits.
Sure. Just chaos.
I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
No, there was like a real, I mean, certainty is always appealing, right? So whether it's Carlin being certain or though this is 180, Trump being certain, certainty always has its appeal to people, and there's going to be an audience for that. So I remember being affected the same way by Carlin, like, wow, because people don't speak with that much conviction about like atheism or about the lack of a God, or you know what I mean? So like you said, especially as a young person, when you see that, it's like it's kind of ground shifting, just in the sense of like, wow, he's not even flinching. He's just like, he's the conviction that he stands there and delivers this is impressive.
Yeah. Which makes sense why you connected so hard to Trump.
Yeah. That's why I was a big Trump supporter. This is a commercial. All right, and we're back. I'm still I'm figuring all this shit out. So I want to talk because you were a music teacher. Is that correct?
That's correct. 5 years when I first graduated college, I was teaching during the day at 2 different schools and starting stand up at night.
Wow. I went to school for music to be a music teacher.
Oh, wow.
But I never did it.
You never did it.
I did the student teaching, graduated with a degree, and then didn't do it.
Wow.
How old were the kids that you were teaching?
Elementary school.
K
through 5. Yeah.
Did you enjoy it?
I did. It was kind of the perfect complement while you're starting out in comedy, because it was public speaking. It was kind of figuring out your voice. Like teachers have voices in a similar sense that comedians do. You have your teacher persona, your voice. It's, you're in front of groups of, especially as the music teacher, because of like budget cuts and stuff, they would group like, I'd have like 3 classes at once. So it could be like 100 kids or whatever it was. So yeah, it was beneficial in that I was flexing that muscle of keeping people's attention, being engaging, trying in this sense, trying to teach them something as opposed to comedy. So yeah, I think it had its benefit. And I studied music and I love music. So, and I also had done a lot of, musical theater from age 13 through. Yeah. I mean, that was really my entree into being on stage and performing properly.
I've never heard you talk about musicals on stage. I went to college for musical theater, and if you see me do stand up for 2 minutes, you know that fact.
I see you tweet about it and stuff, but I was not aware. Yeah.
Which is enough. So when you taught for 5 years, was comedy going well that you were like, I'm gonna stop teaching? Was that what happened there? Because I imagine that's a funny thing to tell other teachers, like 5 years and be like, I'm leaving to do stand up like full time. I imagine being another teacher being like, okay, good luck. Like it's just a wild thing to hear from a teacher.
It's funny you bring that up, because I kept it a secret for the first 2 to 3 years. I didn't tell any of the staff. I was really kind of undercover. I'd come in, like I said, I was at 2 different schools, and I think it was 2 days a week at each school. So I was really just like the young teacher who would blow in, teach, and leave, and come back next week. So they didn't know a whole lot about me, and I didn't offer much of anything. But what happened was I got Conan. Conan was my first like TV thing. And the parents heard about it. The parents maybe saw my name in the TV guide or whatever, however the hell it broke. Word got out that Mr. Alexandro was going to be on Conan. And then they taped it, and a bunch of people brought it in. And, so in a way that was the best way for people to find out.
For sure. Oh yeah. For sure. As a start, as opposed my start was like, hey, so I'm performing at Broadway Comedy Club this Saturday at 4 p.m. and I need 15 of you to be there. That's such a cool way to start letting people know. Oh, I love also like stand-up comedy. That's probably the only profession teachers could be like, I heard that doesn't pay very well.
Yeah, exactly. But it's funny to circle back to what we were talking about earlier. One of the principals asked me to perform at like a teacher conference of like, kind of team building. And foolishly, I said yes. To this day, I don't know why the fuck I would say. I mean, they saw me on Conan. Like, just leave well enough alone. So I say yes, and I go to this, teacher retreat, and I do like probably 20 minutes or something. And I'm not gonna say I bombed, but it was just like work the whole way. Yeah, and it's like now. Now I replaced the shine from like they saw me on TV to like, this is real. This is really what I do in a fucking hotel.
Laughs in post. I guess that's how it works.
Yes. Yes.
That's and before we get to the last segment, I am curious because like so you open for Jim Gaffigan a lot.
Yeah.
And Jim Gaffigan is, I mean, until the Trump stuff, was a notoriously clean, just in a certain way. I have a friend who opens for Brian Regan sometimes, and I'm always curious, like, because you have a hard edge. Your stand-up is not, you're not a clean comic by any stretch of the imagination.
No. I mean, it's funny, you know, Jim and I have known each other for probably close to 20 years. So he is like a few years ahead of me, but we kind of essentially came up through the clubs around the same time, and even like did some road gigs together where we drove. So you know, our friendship was solidified going way back. So yeah, I think it was just, you know, he was a fan of what I did, and fortunately asked me to open for him at a time that, you know, the gig was needed. And you know, it kind of got me out of not the minor leagues, but you know, there's only so many times that you can go back to some club in the Midwest, you know, for, you know, the same money that you've been making for 8 years. So it was an opportunity to open for him, who was playing arenas at that point, and hang out with my friend, you know. So it was kind of the best of all worlds, where I was making more money than I was headlining. So it allowed me the flexibility to do both, where I could kind of fill my off weekends with my own stuff and keep doing my thing. But when I opened for him, I would keep it kind of, you know, I had enough stuff that I could keep it down the middle, maybe spring, like we were talking about earlier. Like, all right, maybe I can drop this thing in and just, like, you know, ruffle some feathers, get a few fans that dig what I do. You know, so I was still doing my act, but I was leaving out some of the more edgy stuff.
Yeah. I imagine at an arena, you could still like crush, but still be doing something where there's 10 people in that arena that are going to write a letter to Jim.
Sure. That has happened, you know, and luckily, you know, like I said, he knows who I am. He knows what I do. And he doesn't care, you know, and because I'm not the type that's going to be like, fuck, I'm going to blow this fucking place up.
Yeah.
I'm going to do all my political stuff. I'm going to do my stuff about abortion or whatever. And then let's see, you know, follow that, Jim. You know, it's not that I'm there to open.
I love Jim just be like, what the fuck, dude? I filled the stadium. Dude, come on.
Yeah.
It's hard. I mean, you know, I still feel like I'm figuring out as a comedian, because I'm not clean, but I can work clean. I like to some political stuff, but like I just did this gig in Connecticut, and it was the most I had ever done. It was 800 people outside, and it was tough circumstances. You know, I had to really, I couldn't lose them. And
my wife and I were there. we were there. We were in the back.
Oh, you were in the Trump shirt in the back. That said, and I go there, and the stage, it's on a tractor, and a huge American flag behind me.
Oh God.
And I kept thinking in my head, like, you know, I wanted to push the envelope a little bit, or I wanted to do a couple things about Trump. And, you know, I have this one, it's so funny because obviously I'm usually with liberals. And so I have a lot of jokes that poke fun at liberals. And it's something about my grandma. She passed away 3 years ago, but she hated Donald Trump, and she would just be so happy to know she voted for Biden. And that's the treat that they get, because they go ape shit for that. Yeah. And then I have to be like, guys, I'm a New York Jew. I hate you. I hate everything about you and your culture, and you'd hate me if you knew me. And I get a couple things about Trump in there, but it's almost this thing. The show went well, and then, you know, these orange men in polos come up after, and they're like, we were nervous when you got into politics, but you took some shots at Biden too, so that's okay. And it's this mix where I'm like, well, I'm glad I didn't bomb. I'm glad I did well at the show. And then immediately I'm like, ugh, they liked me. I don't want them to like me. It's the fucking, you know,
that's the way it goes, man. You know, like when you're younger, I remember for me, there was this aversion to like, I'm doing what the fuck I want to do, and so be it. You're like, you're not going to tell me, you're not going to give me parameters. I'm doing what I want to do. And then enough times where things go wrong, and you're like, well, maybe I didn't have to behave. Maybe I have 20 other minutes that I wrote. It's my act. It's not like they're telling me I can't do my stuff. They're just saying, could you not do the prison rape joke at a corporate gig, you know. So I had to learn that lesson. Like, I'm an artist, you know, you're not going to give me any parameters. So I had to learn that, and you know, that's part of being a professional too. It's not like you're a sellout. You're doing the job that you were hired to do. But you also pick those other rooms where I know I'm really free here. This is my room to experiment. This is where I really go for it. And you grow and you blossom and you find your full voice there. And then, you know, you kind of you bring that with you wherever you go, and you kind of gauge like, all right, you know, I'm making $2,000 on this gig. Do I really want to sacrifice it for the prison rape joke?
Yeah. Have you ever been booed off stage, a full boo?
As a rapper, I was. My brother and I were a rap duo, Brotherly Love, and we performed at the Apollo.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
So
How
funny.
quick was that? Must have been the world record boo when you walked on stage, boo.
There were boos when we walked on, but we made it through my brother's first verse with kind of a smattering of boos. And then like once I came in, I think I made it like another 5 to 10 seconds. And then we got booed off.
Is this a joke group or like a serious, like you?
No, this was legit, man. This Brotherly Love
That's
was representing Belrose, Queens.
Oh, wow. That's so funny.
Yeah.
To go to the Apollo. Wow.
Yeah. No, we were serious about it. We did it for like better part of a decade. It was most of the 80s that we were writing, performing. We'd do like block parties, just shows around Queens and stuff. So it wasn't like we did it like a lark. It was like we had recorded a bunch of tracks.
Were you on Spotify?
Wow.
We do have a Facebook fan group. You can look up Brotherly Love, and there's several of our tracks are there.
I absolutely will.
Just don't boo as you listen to
Can we
it.
insert like 10 seconds of a song into this episode?
Yeah, go
Can
for
we
it.
find it?
Do you open your eyes, letting the sun celebrate life, unload the gun? Pain in our world is a reality. You look around and you try to find morality. Your spirits are down, I can't think anymore. Where am I going? What's the score?
Do you miss rapping? I always fantasize about rapping. I never will. But I could see if I became like crazy famous, I could see like at 50 just being like, Gianmarco dropped a rap album and everyone hates it. And I love rap though.
Oh yeah, no, I mean that's where it came from. It came from love. It came from, we had both gone to like a predominantly Black and Latino junior high school, and this was at the inception of rap. By the way, this was like when the genre came to be. It wasn't like whoever has a new album, like Jay-Z has a new album. This was like, this is a new music. So like we were listening to this shit, like early Run DMC and just all the early stuff that Rapper's Delight, all that stuff was like, what the fuck is this, man? Holy shit. Guys were bringing in cassette tapes and blowing your mind on a weekly basis. And it was poetry, and my brother to this day is still a poet. He's a poet. He's a published poet. So yeah, for us, it was all creativity, man. It was just like falling in love with this culture and falling in love with this new music. So it all came from that. But, we were just a couple white kids from Queens, and either you have it or you don't.
I think everyone should have to go up at the Apollo one time in their life.
Well, I tell you, man, after that, nothing. What the fucking comedy is going to compare to that? I got booed off the stage as a rapper at the Apollo. Like, yeah, comedy. Bring whatever you've got.
Chappelle was booed off at 13. I think that was his story.
I remember that might have been around the same time. Now that I think of it, because I was around 19 or 20, so I'm about that. That there's that gap between Chappelle and I.
And you and your brother and Chappelle are at a diner. You're like, no, we're gonna make it. We're this rap group, and you as a comedian, we're gonna go all the way with this.
Be just fine. We'll get the last laugh.
All right, let's go to our segment. This has gotta stop. This has gotta stop. Paige pointed out, Paige, who helps me caption the videos and helps with social media, pointed out, I listened to your new album, The Lost Record.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. I mean, I'm not blowing smoke up your ass. I would have listened to it either way. I've listened to all your stuff, but I also love the concept of it, because when I think of the comedians that I really love, sometimes there's like bootlegs out there, or like you see like weird tapings of jokes that didn't make the specials that you can find. And so you kind of compiled all sorts of material from different sources during like a gap, I guess, that you put out stuff on like Comedy Central late night, and it was fantastic. And one of them, though, you said you said the phrase, "This has got to stop." You were talking, this was the boys choir and then Negro spirituals that you said like, "This has got to stop." And I was like, well, that's why that's the name of the segment.
Yeah, no, perfect. So the album was a collection of jokes from like 11 years between my first and second album. You know, I to this day I don't fully comprehend why I waited that long. This is stuff that I put out a Comedy Central special. I was on Letterman and Conan. So the stuff was going out in these big platforms, but I just foolishly never put out a proper album. So again, with the pandemic, having the time and finally being able to zero in and listen back to all the stuff, that's what the Lost album is. It's just this stuff that, that I love, and I'm as proud of it as any other stuff. And also stuff that I discovered in listening back, like, oh shit, I really loved like the Negro spiritual joke that you're talking about. I mean, that's a joke where I just talk about these genres of music, whether it's boys choir music or Negro spirituals. Like maybe these shouldn't be genres of music anymore. Like if you walk into a store, like, do you have some boys choir? Well, there's a choir section over there. No, I'm specifically boys choir. Just the bizarre nature of the and same with Negro spirituals. That's really the only context that we're still using the word Negro, for like this genre of music. So yeah, things like that. When I listen back, some of them were jokes I even forgot about, and that's one of them. I'm like, this one's a little like on the line, a little weird, but it makes me laugh. So some of the stuff was that, and I decided to put that out, and so it was exciting to kind of mark the time of that lost period and put that album out.
Yeah, I think it's like, I think about, I'm still figuring out like, oh, do I want to record an album? Do I want to wait for my first late night? And like, I think it's becoming increasingly fractured in terms of like, there was a time where it felt like you put out a special and that, and now it's like you put out little things here, little things there. And it's kind of the artist's responsibility, if they wanted to kind of centralize or like be like, hey, if you want to see kind of this era of my life, I'll collect it for you. So I just thought, there's a lot of other comedians where I'm like, oh, it'd be cool if they made their lost album of sorts.
I mean, I think it's a good thing to do for the reason that you're saying, like, so that it is centralized into one place. Here it is. Here's this period of time. Here's where my head was at. Here's where the country or the world was at, because some of it is topical or political in nature. But that was also a decision to make. Like, all right. So some of this stuff is kind of ephemeral and no longer really needs to be, out there. But the stuff that I felt stood up, regardless of what I was talking about, was the stuff that I wound up including.
So then for this segment, do you have this has got to stop other than boys choir music? Anything that's got to stop right now?
In a certain sense, I feel like it's got to stop just talking about the pandemic. I realize we have to talk about it, but anytime you feel like that's going to be the way that you couch a statement, like, oh, this was pre-pandemic, or, just like, we all know what just happened.
Yes.
Like, I'm so tired of it being just, pervasive. Like every conversation has to be about the pandemic, or that the pandemic comes back, or, oh, now there's a new strain. It's like, no, like there has to be that line, like, talking. And by the way, there's someone who loves talking about politics, activism, but I almost have a line like, what, I get offended if you bring up the pandemic. I want to be like, don't talk about the pandemic around me.
Yeah, because it really is everything. Someone will be like, well, I was doing this thing, but then, and you're like, yes, that happened to the entire world. Right. Like, it wasn't just like, yeah, I figured that you stopped doing this one thing because of the fucking like, it's one of those things where it's at this point, it's just a given. So it's not a way to like start a conversation or to find common ground. It's just boring. You know what I mean? Like, it's, and it's, that's not to take away from anyone that, if they're dealing with a health thing or blah, blah, but, it's just a thing. And I was just talking to him earlier about this. Like, it's just like, I went on a trip and I ran into every American. That's all they wanted to talk about was the pandemic. And it was just like, good God, we're on like vacation in this beautiful place. And all you fucking Americans want to talk about are like masks and how like we have to wear masks here. We don't have to wear masks in America. And you're like, just shut the fuck up. Like, just, so anyways, it's just really boring. It's boring.
It is boring. And it's human nature because it's kind of inserted itself as like the go-to just chit chat kind of like icebreaker small talk, right?
Yes. Like weather
instead of the
like,
weather. Yeah. I got 5 minutes on the pandemic. Everybody does,
Yeah.
Like I just mean in small talk, not even stage. I'm just talking about, I got 5 small talk minutes on the pandemic.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Also, now when I tell people how much traveling I did last year, I won't mention it was during the pandemic height.
Yeah,
of all the waves. That's a good one, though. I do think we're stuck there. All right, well, then let's go to this lovely.
You better count your blessing.
Right, Ted?
I can hear that.
Okay, good. For a second, I was scared. You just saw us just go like. So this is you. You better count your blessing. We say one thing we're thankful for. Russell, you got something coming to mind? Are you still thinking?
Come back.
Okay, yeah. You had a look on your face like, oh right, we do this at the end.
We do this segment.
Episode number 23. Yeah. So I will say because I know she's our mutual friend Paige. She's been such a blessing in my life. She reached out to me kind of randomly, and she was like, I'm looking for some comedians to work with. I'm in between jobs, and helped me very generously, and kind of helped figure out a lot of things in my life. Introduced me to you via email, and then she's just helped a lot with this podcast. She captions all the videos. So for those of people who like the videos and all our stuff, if you are looking for someone to help with your social media, your captions, reach out to me, and then I will assess if you are up to snuff for me to pass along your info to Paige. But I'm very thankful for her, and I do want to give her a very specific shout out. Russell, you got one?
Yeah. My friend Vincent is visiting from Illinois right now, and I haven't seen him in long time, and it's been I'm very thankful to get time with him.
Where's he from? Where do you know him from?
I used to do Shakespeare with him back in the day, and so, but he now is getting his doctorate, and so he's traveling a lot, but I just haven't seen him in so long, and it's been like I only get to see him for a couple days, but it's been really nice and fun to catch up.
Do you quote Shakespeare? Do you just go,
no, we don't.
Hark! What light through yonder window breaks?
No,
it's Russell.
Yeah, that's what we do.
And Ted, do you have something you're blessing for the?
Yes, I do. First, I'm going to piggyback on your shout out to Paige, because she has had the same impact on my life, my career. She's been so helpful. She's always just so professional and on point with everything. Any requests you have, and like you said, with kind of offering to help me, even when like kind of our budget shrunk, and I wasn't really able to pay her the same way that we had been. So Paige, if any comedian is looking for someone to do all of those things, I mean, I could not give her a higher recommendation. So I want to first piggyback on that, because she deserves all that and more. But as far as, it's funny, man, as much as I shit on like social media and the time suck and just the nature of like, as a comedian, you have to do it, but do we really have to do it? Or am I convincing myself? I've had to do a lot of like promotional stuff for the Lost album coming out. But, I hopped on, and I hate like Facebook, and like they bury your posts. I posted about my album, by the way, to on my fan page, which has 8,000 followers. The post got 1 like, and it was from the guy who edited the album. Do you believe that shit? Like
we have a sketch team, and we joked for like brutally long amount of time. It would be, thank God we had 5 team members, because it meant 5 likes on every single post.
I think there are people that like it, but
no, Facebook, they're monsters.
They bury it unless you pay,
Unless you pay.
Yeah. So like even my family was like, oh, I didn't see it. I didn't know. So, but this is not about that. What this is about was I hopped on Twitter has this new thing that I think kind of mimics Clubhouse, right? Yeah. Spaces. So I've spent some time on Clubhouse and various rooms and stuff. So I was like, let me just hop on Twitter Spaces, impromptu, do a little thing talking about the album. And about 15 people wound up coming on over the course of, I think I did like, I don't know, half hour, 45 minutes. And it was really cool. Like some of them were comedians, some of them were people that just follow me, some didn't know me. And it wound up being this like cool, just like forum of like talking about the album, talking about comedy. So I was, you know, as kind of burnt out as you can get on all the things in the business, it was just like this nice connection and kind of, I don't know, it in some weird way. And people were so sweet. And one guy told me I first started listening to your stuff when I was in junior high school, like 12. I saw your Comedy Central special. So yeah, there was just these like little moments of connecting, and I came out of it just feeling boosted, you know, rather than depleted by social media.
That's great.
Yeah. So, you know, that was something that made me feel good.
Great. All right. Cool. Twitter needs some help and it's coming our way. So thank you for that, Twitter. Russell, do you have anything to plug? I was gonna look up what day this is actually gonna come out. Well, when's our sketch show? You can
July 9th. We have a show, Asylum NYC, Uncle Function, Friday night, 7:30 p.m.
Yeah, this comes out June 29th.
We'll all be there.
So that'll still
Ted
be good.
won't be there, but
yes.
Gianmarco and I will be there.
For me, I forgot to say at the beginning, you know, this is the downside. You're probably listening on Spotify, Pandora, Apple, but we do have a Patreon where you can see the full video of this. It's patreon.com/downside, and $5 a month. You get 2 bonus episodes a month. You get videos of fucking everything. It's a shitload of work. But I do it for you. We also, if you go to my YouTube channel, we're going to upload like longer clips and all my social media. So I have shows. Go to my Instagram to see the shows. But we really appreciate you listening, and you know, subscribe, join the Patreon, post about it on shit, and help us keep this going. We really appreciate you. And Ted, any plugs?
TedAlexandro.com, at TedAlexandro, all over the socials. And just love what you guys are doing. Support this dynamic duo, people. I mean, you're listening to them. They're entertaining you. They're edifying you. Support them.
And so where do you want people to get the Lost album? Like, what's the best? Is it buying it on iTunes, listening on Spotify? You don't give a shit. Join the Patreon.
Yeah, exactly. I don't care. As long as they're listening to it, just make sure you follow, subscribe, or whatever, so that because I think they Spotify or Apple Music or wherever it is, they wind up playing you more if you amass a larger number of followers. So if wherever you're listening to the Lost album, just click that subscribe, follow.
Lost album. And Cut Up was last year too, right?
You know, I put out, I'm not bragging here, I'm just stating facts. I put out three specials / albums during the pandemic. I put out Stay at Home Comedian, which was just put together from my Instagram live. It was just kind of this lark. I put a tongue-in-cheek comedy special out that was shot on my phone in my 2-bedroom apartment. And the New York Times wound up writing about Stay at Home Comedian because it was like the first pandemic special.
Yeah.
And nobody had done it. So, I'm doing comedy 28 years, and the Times finally reviews the special that I do in my living room. But then, I did Cut Up about a year ago, and now the Lost album is the third one.
Pretty incredible. Well, thank you for joining us. And we should remember whether you're in New York or you move to Connecticut, someday we'll all move 6 feet under the ground. This is the downside.
1, 2, 3. Downside.